managed to track down the plastic gauge you need is green, and it's I believe it's 3,000s to 5,000s is what it's measured at, and it'll be able to check every one of these clearances. Walk you guys through that. These are, I believe, they're 14 millimeters. The owner had said it had a really light noise slash knock in the bottom whenever he ribbed it at high RPM temperatures. You know, like if he's downshifted to get up a hill or anything like that. So I have to remove this bearing cap, this crank bearing cap, and wheel it off here. Hopefully it don't fall through, which if it does, it does. Down here, this one here. Get out of the way. Pop this rod bearing cap off. You see that? That is not a good thing. See, even when I wipe that out, you still see all that brown stuff? The bearing's toast. Now that means that this rod bearing is bad. And like I said, when I took the thing apart, the oil sump was flat full of pieces of the timing chain. I guess the previous person had actually managed to break it. The timing chain had broke this guard right here. Instead of taking and dropping the head on it, this plastic piece right here, you know, showed you guys. I guess instead of actually taking it off, the oil pan off and fishing the pieces out, it fell down in the bottom here, and it had been bouncing around in here. What happens is that pickup is pick some of those smaller pieces up, and it's running and it's pumped it through this bearing, as you can see right here, and it's got down in this bearing. This is a bad thing because this is friction. You need oil in here, not this junk. So we're going to be replacing these, and I'll show you guys how to use plastic gauge and do these. First thing I'm going to do is take every single one of these loose, take good pictures, make sure you know which way these go. These only go one way. Take all these bad boys right here off. Once I get all these right here took off, we'll remove the cranks because I'm going to do the ones on the crank too. Alright, now we got all the bearings out, the crank removed. Do want to make note, something I should have made note before. This back piece right here is held on by 4 12 millimeters. One goes in here, there's one that goes in over here, and then there's 3 more going around it. Those need to be removed before you put them on the stand if you're going to remove the crank. If you're not going to take your crank out, which I don't know why you'd be doing a bottom end rebuild without taking the crank out, but this is on. If you're going to be rebuilding it, you have to take it out. So take those bolts out before you put it on there until you get, so you don't end up in my predicament. And like I explained further, I couldn't find the bolts that were long enough to go through this, so I run my bolts through that. But if you just run it through that, you would have enough room so you wouldn't have an issue, so you could wait and take it out if you'd like. Now that we got all these out, make sure that you take pictures and you mark where each one of these crank bearing caps go. They're made to fit one specific place, whether it's this one or that one. So make sure that you mark those or put them in order. Now what I've done was I took a lot of pictures. I always do. Take a lot of pictures. There's numbers on each one of them and arrows and things to help you put them back where they go. Another thing I always do too is I got them all in order. Front to back, the way they come out. There's also clips in here. The middle one has a C-ring clip. I don't want to pull it up to show you, but it has a C-ring clip. There's also one that goes on the front of this crank that goes right here. I can't remember specifically what the piece is called, but there is one. It's a little C-ring clip like this. Looks like this. Yeah. One of them goes on front of this. Make sure, I'm using Haynes manual to rebuild it. Make sure you look at your manual. If you get lost or feel kind of lost about something, make sure you check it. It'll explain to you all this stuff in way better detail than what I'm doing. Just trying to give you guys an overview. The reason why I took the crank out is because the next thing we have to do, we have to hone these cylinders. The reason why we're going to hone these cylinders is we're replacing the piston heads itself, which are these pieces right here. They're laying flat. Since we're replacing all 4 of them, the new rings and everything, this cylinder is made for the ring it was in it. Well, I had a little bit of blow by, as I showed you guys before. It was getting burning a little bit of oil. So what we're going to do is we're going to run a engine hone down in this. So you need to remove the crank to run the engine home, because you don't want, because it's going to flake off pieces of metal. You don't want those pieces of metal on your crank, because if it gets in that crank, goes through one of the oil galleys, it's going to end up all over it. And then you're going to have the same thing you have now. You're going to have premature engine failure. And every single one of these bearings right here are going to get grease is going to get metal shavings and things in. You're going to have the same issue again. So take it out. Another reason why I went ahead and took them out, that being the main reason. Another reason why I took it out is because while I have this thing out, I'm going to make sure that I check all the clearances for this while I got this out. So make sure you guys do that. Read the manual. You're not sure, read the manual. The manual will walk you through it, I promise, guys. If you get lost, Pirates Bay, plenty of people have rebuilt one of these. People with no experience, the people with plenty of experience. You get really lost, you can call Ted at Engine Builders. He'll walk you through it either way. But make sure you take this out. Now, after I take this out, as you can see this oil galley right here, what I'm going to do is, when I get this right here shaved out, I'm going to take shave. When I get it honed out, and I do have an engine hone, I'll show you guys that when I get there. I'm going to take an engine hone and hone all 4 of these, so that way I know the new rings are going to seat. Then when I get that done, I'm going to take it, I'm going to blow with an air gun, which if you don't have air tools, which is fine, I'm not using any air tools, taking any of this part of these all hand tools. In the event that you have to have, don't have an air gun, once I get all that shaved, you're going to have shavings in here everywhere, so you want to clean all this up, because you don't, like I said, you don't want any of that metal going down in your oil galleys. You do not want that recycled around the bottom of your engine. So what I'm going to do, as soon as I get that done, just to check all these ports to make sure that all the oil galleys and everything are clean and they don't have junk in them, I'm going to stick my air hose down in there and I'm going to blow it. Blow every one of them, so that way they're clean, so that way if there is anything else in there, it'll blow out. Another thing, if you don't have an air gun and you need these right here blowed out, you can use can CO2. I don't know if it'll blow hard enough, but I mean, with good enough seal, it should blow good enough. We're just blowing it out. Another thing, if assuming that you're not worried about that, you don't really have the tools to do that, no air gun, you do it in your garage, building, whatever it is you're doing it in, you can always use a leaf blower. You can't get a leaf blower down in that without, well, I won't say you can't, because I know people do a lot of things, but yeah, I don't think I'm going to get a leaf blower to blow directly in that, but enough to blow a little pressure down in there to get all these clean, all these other places. The shavings being the main focus of the concern, you can always take a leaf blower and blow them out. So make sure you guys blow that out. So the next thing we're going to move on to is when you take these, these are your main bearings. Whenever you remove these main bearings, and if you notice, guys, they only go in. See the groove? See, there's a groove right here on this side. On this one is 1, 2, third one, so it's right in the dead middle. You see this groove that's on this piece right here? It's right here on the edge. Show you. See this piece right here? It's got a groove on it. Well, that groove right there is made to go down in this groove right here, so that way you know you're putting it in right. Then again, make sure that you take plenty of pictures, so that way you're not wrong, because if you force this thing down in here this way, like this, there's no way oil is going to get to this crank here in it like this. See, this one has the hole in it? That's what lets that oil in. If you put these in backwards like this, and I've seen it happen, you will absolutely not run very far before it decides it's going to lock up, because your crank is not getting any oil at all. When I say not far, I'm saying maybe 5 to 6 minutes tops on startup without it. So make sure you do that correctly. Also, if you do this by mistake, you're also not only ruining the engine in general, depending on how bad it does, you also will be buying a new crank. So pay attention to what you're doing. Make sure that everything lines up and goes back in here the way it came out. Our kit from Engine Builders from Ted has every bit of this stuff, so don't be scared about where they go. As far as I know, and it's been a while, like I've said, each one of these should be the same. There's no difference in between any of them. Just to be sure, I have a micrometer or a dial gauge. I'm just going to check the sides on it, side to side, and check to make sure they're the same before I take them out. So that way I know 100% that this one's bigger than that one, then I know. Now I do know that the front and back ones are specific to watch them. Make sure when you do this, in general, whenever you're doing this back seal that's down there on that crank, that mounts on the back of this engine, make sure you replace that seal, because nothing worse than getting this thing put together and your truck leaking oil in the back, knowing you have to take the whole engine and every bit of this crap back out just to fix a leak that's happening in the back. So you park your truck and it's dropping oil down in your driveway or whatever. So make sure you replace your rear seal. Make sure it's sealed good, and if you have to, put it all in there and put some more in it. If it's leaking, fix it now. Even if you have to take the oil pan back off and all this stuff apart, fix it now before you put it back in the truck, and then you never get to it fixing it. So guys, we'll go from there. Whenever I'll roll this thing over, show you guys how we're going to go about using the engine hone and how it works, for those of you that don't know. So just here we go. Now we got this thing rolled over. We got our crank removed, which I got covered up here. What we're going to do now is we're going to hone the cylinders. These cylinders, make sure you check all this stuff for cracks. I took a light, went real slow. Took a good 30 minutes and went really slow and looked really close for all cracks. Make sure down inside your cylinder here isn't cracked. Because if it is, there's no point in honing it. You'll have to replace it. So do your work now so you don't do this for no reason. I did notice there's some buildup and stuff inside the water jackets around the cylinder, which is fine because I'm going to take it to the machine shop, have them stick it inside their, well, it looks like a big giant dishwasher, and hopefully get this dirt and this other stuff out. But I figure there's no point in doing that until you do this. Now I bought this specific hone, which looks like this. Weird looking gizmo. The one I really wanted are ones that instead of having these pads on each end of them, they had little round balls. And it was spring loaded just like this one is. And it would work to do the trick. And I talked to a lot of people and they say that they believe that the balls work a lot better. But nobody had one, so I picked this up. I found it. They also have it I got this one specifically at Advance, but AutoZone had it as well. I think it was like 34, 35 bucks, maybe a little more. So I picked this thing up, and the way this thing works is you stick this down in here like this, and then you can tighten or loosen this, and this will adjust how much tension is on this. So basically, this can determine how much you're taking away and how much you're not taking away. Now, if you're not for sure how to use one of these, please review another video maybe on here, or read your read your assembly book. Mine's the Haynes manual. It'll walk you through how to do it. One thing to make sure is you want to make sure that you lube these cylinders very well before you start using this tool. Because if you don't lube these, you're going to scratch these and then it's not going to seal. You want to make sure you use plenty of lube. Now they make home assembly lube. After talking to a couple people, they said transmission fluid works a little faster. You can also use regular oil if you're in a pinch or whatever you need to. Just make sure you keep this thing really, really oiled. So in order to do that, we're going to use this. These oil cans right here, and basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this can, I'm going to squirt inside of this, all the way inside this really good, and probably take my hand and get it really coated really well. And then you're going to start out really slow with this. Don't stick this thing. It goes on a cordless drill, just like this one. You don't want to stick this thing in here and start hitting it wide open and start moving this up and down the cylinder wide open. Slow and steady, guys. Slow and steady. Just take your time, get a feel for it before you reach in there and just start spinning the dog piss out of it. Okay, so we'll lube this thing up real good. We're going to spin it here. I'll show you guys what it should look like. What you're looking for inside the book also is a picture. Is a hatch pattern. You want to see it cross. It'll look like, well, basically look like, you see a lot of cartoons when people look tired or exhausted or whatever, they draw them little hatch patterns. Kind of looks like a tic-tac-toe kind of thing on their face to show that they're hurt or whatever. Basically, that's what you want inside these cylinders, which basically is going to help. So when we put a new rings and a new piston head in there, it's going to help it seat. So what we're going to do, guys, is lube this up here. And I'm going to show you guys what it looks like. I can't show you guys doing it. I don't have anything to hold the camera. So I'm going to do that, and then I'll come back and I'll show you guys what it looks like. I got 2 of these honed, ready to go. As you can see down the bottom of this one, the black mark, which is down in this one, and there's a mark right here, right? Well, that's just where the cylinder is probably out of circle a little bit, which is fine, because the rings, when they come up, the rings itself won't stop here. The rings will stop down here, I believe. You can measure it if you'd like. Now, if you'd like to hone that off, that's entirely up to you. I'm not going to. Just like on this one, as you can see on the bottom of this one, the black spot at the bottom, as you can see on this one, there are no black line, which means the bottom of it is perfectly round and in good shape. See how the pattern is really good and cross-hatched around. See all the scuff marks? You can feel it with your hand, and it feels kind of rough, which it does have stuff still in it. And in case you don't believe me, see the rag with all the stuff on it? See all the stuff on it now? It's showing you some metal in this. So make sure that you clean these out with soap and water when you get done. You can use hot soap or hot water and soap, and you can clean these out. Now I'm going to take mine to the machine shop, stick it in his pressure washer, stick it in his dishwasher doodad. He'll clean all this out, which is fine because I'm going to have him clean the whole entire thing, so that way I know it's clean before I put anything back in it. So right there's what your cylinder should look like. Right here's what it looked like prior. Here's one I haven't done yet. See how you can see the real shiny surface here, and then you see it's dark. That tells me that this surface right here is not the same as that. So what you want to try to do is make sure this shiny surface here is dull. You want all of it to look dull, just like this. See how it all looks uniformity? But make sure you only take off what you need. So what I've done was, when I put my drill bit in this, I make sure that I lubed it really well. I also lubed the pads before, the stones or whatever on the home before I stuck it down in here, and I start really slow. And then I just move from top to bottom really slow, and then really slow back up. I'm trying to keep consecutive speeds so that way I know it's honing it the same. After you do that, you should get a rough like cylinder. Make sure if you store this overnight before you wash it and whatever, wash it and get it dry and put the cylinders back together. Make sure you coat this with oil because these will rust. Now how fast it'll rust, I'm not 100% sure. It would depend on your environment, where you're at, temperature, such and such. But make sure you get this done, you get this cleaned out, make sure you coat this with some oil. Oil's not going to hurt this at all, as you can tell, because oil is actually riding in this. That's what your actual rings on your pistons doing, is a sliding seal. So you want to make sure you do that. So now we're going to move on to getting this one and the back one done. Once we get that done, we'll be ready to assemble, take our piston heads off our connecting rods, whereas ours didn't come with the connecting rods. Put that on there, and I'll show you how we're going to slide this back down in here. But before that, I'll make sure I show you guys how we align the rings and we put it on the actual cylinder, or the piston itself, before we start it down in the cylinder. So hang in with me this far. We got this thing back. Instead of actually taking it to the machine shop to have him do it, it was going to be a bit longer than what I anticipated. And to save 50 bucks, I decided to just take it car wash and spray it off myself. Not really all that concerned with this stuff that's left. I've cleaned most of this off. I should clean it all the way off before I sprayed it off, but kind of, guess jumped the gun on that one. So if you guys want to clean this stuff off before you do it, this will keep any of these contaminants from getting inside this. What I did do is I cleaned it, sprayed it all off really good, the car wash, little soap, water, let it dry. One thing I did do when I got it back was I let it dry. And then each one of these ports, these oil galleys, and each one of them, and every other port, including on the top, on the other side, where the head sits on the actual block itself, I took those water galleys, where the water goes around through there, and I sprayed it in there and had all kinds of stuff come out of it, all kinds of rust and particles, where people was either A, using bad water with contaminants, or B, not changing your antifreeze regularly, because in case you didn't know, usually the time span is 3 to 5 years on that. You're supposed to drain it all out and change it. Nobody ever does that. So over the good part of 20 years, you seem to get buildup. So make sure you guys do that. Now here's what the step we're on to now is clearancing. We have to clearance these bearings right here. To make these are main bearings where a crank goes. We got to clearance them. In order to clearance them, use this thing that I brought up before. And it's called plastic gauge. Well, all this is, so on one side it shows metric, which I don't think we're going to use. I think it uses actual English standard inside my book, but which is okay, because when you flip this thing over on the other side, we have inches. So each one of these little pieces right here, I'll show you guys how this works. There's a little bitty plastic piece inside this. There's a hole on the end of it. If you guys can see it, see the little hole right there on the end in the dead middle. You slide this thing out. It's a little green piece of plastic. Now you can buy tools to do this, but for my application I'm using this. Now you can buy tools and you can use a micrometer and you can get clearances that way if you want to do it that way. That's entirely up to you. Mine's just going back into a stock engine. I'm not doing anything high performance, not doing any upgrades at all. All I'm doing is just rebuilding the motor to stock. So we're going to use plastic gauge. So one thing to note when you're using this is don't bend it, for one. For two, make sure you keep this paper, because you'll need this, and I'll show you why later. So we got this engine back, dried out and everything. So now what we're going to do is we're going to take and we're going to put in our main bearings, which I have in a set right here. The engine builder set comes with them, comes in a box. And the way I knew they were main bearings, if you go with the engine builder, is right here, Toyota main bearings. So I know that's the bearings I'm going to use. So make sure when you guys put these in here, as you can tell, the oil galleys, which I brought up before, make sure that these holes, as you can see in this one in the bottom, I've not removed it from the pack yet, but you can see this hole that's right here. You want to make sure that that hole goes over top of this. Now if you're not sure about anything, just rewind the video, take a look, and write that down in your notes if you're taking notes. If not, and you're watching this out in the shop, you're stuck, that's what you do. Another way you can make sure you're not going to put these in backwards is this mark right here that's on the side of this casting. There's a mark on the side of this right here, and you can see it. You can see the raised portion of it right here by my thumb. That part will actually sit down in this groove. Now one thing is, you don't want oil down in this surface right here. You don't want oil on that. You want the oil to come out, and you want the oil to go on this. And here's why. This bearing, you don't want it moving. You want what's touching this bearing and going to be in between this bearing, which is going to be our crank. You want it to move. So that's what you want to. So take something, make sure that you dry each one of these really good before you set your bearings in there and then set your crank in. So we're going to dry this off, which I already have for the most part, but I'm going to go back over it again. Dry this off really good. Make sure each one of these surfaces are clean of dirt or water or anything specifically. Don't put any oil on them. We're going to set our bearings in place, and then we'll be back. These main bearings down in here. One thing you're going to want to do, get your bottle of engine assembly lube. So make it in a bigger bottle and probably a smaller one. And you want to drop a drop of that on here, on each one of those surfaces now, before we put the caps on and check our clearance. If not, you'll have to take the crank back loose, put it back on there, or take the crank back loose, put your drop on there, and you don't want to do that. So go ahead and just drop you a little bit on each one of them right there, and just take your finger. I'll do one right here to show you. Just want to drop. And this stuff's really thick, guys. Right here, put your drop on there. Clean gloves. Rub this on this bearing surface. This is so when you start this thing, this bearing's not dry. That's crucial. Make sure you do this. Before you install your crank after putting assembly lube on your thing is to, this is your rear seal. Which if your truck's leaking from the rear, this is your culprit right here. So I wasn't sure if our kit come with one, so that's the reason why I wasn't going to record it. However, our kit does come with one, a brand new one. So this right here actually goes in. You can see the open part. There's a little spring inside the lip of this. It actually set down here just like this. So all I done was flip this thing over on the back side, and you see the galley where the oil goes will roll in right here. All I done was just a little screwdriver and popped it out without damaging this area. As you can see, there's no marks on it. So after you do that, clean this surface up really good, and then what I'm going to do, and I don't know if it's really necessarily, I don't think it's needed, but there's a little bit of oil still on this. I'm going to make sure that that is clean and set that on there, but the actual inside of this bearing rides, the inside of this right here, every bit of the inside of this rides on the actual crank itself. So I'm going to put me some assembly lube on it and go around it a couple times with my finger to make sure that's assembled, so that way I don't have to worry about it getting too hot before the oil gets to it on first startup and burning this bearing, because it's just made out of rubber on the inside. It's a little harder rubber on the outside. So once you get that off, take the other one there and just put down there and make sure it's smooth all the way across. Don't beat on it and force it in. If something's not right, fix it now, because if you don't, you put all this together, you're going to have a leak. You don't want a leak, you don't want to fool with this thing, so go ahead and fix it now. Guys, it's on the middle, on your 22RE on the middle, there's thrust bearings. Mine kind of fell out, and when I took it out, so I wasn't really sure, so I looked in the book, seen exactly how they went in there. So basically, these thrust bearings, those are the bottom ones. You can tell the difference between what goes on the block and what goes on the crank by this tab. You see the tab on it? That tab actually points this way, according to the book. So another thing you'll tell is, see this groove, there's one there and then there's one on this side. See these two grooves, there's one here by my thumb and one on the other side. This bolted on here, let me just tell you, it was a pain in the butt to get this on here the way I have it on this engine stand. So I advise you to order by the longer bolts so you can mount this thing out farther from this plate. Now don't forget, when you set this thing in here, you have to install these thrust washers. These go on the middle main bearing journal, which is here. Now, as you can see, one side looks like this, the other side looks like this. See these two grooves? These two grooves, according to the book, face the outside. So the one on this side right here, I make sure these grooves are facing this way. One on this side over here, I'll make sure that they're facing the outside of it as well. So that way, what it does is, I'm assuming, it makes sure there's good oil on this surface here and here, because this is spinning against this. Make sure you do that. Once you set this thing in here, do not spin this crank at all, because these main bearings that are down in here, it'll cause them to move, because, you know, we put some oil on them already, some assembly lube, and when you do that, it'll cause like a suction kind of thing, and it'll cause the bearing to move. So make sure you don't move it. Make sure you recheck those and make sure they've not moved any. So what you want to do is, you can put these on here, which I originally did. I had them on backwards. The book specifies these go facing the outside. So what you can do is, you can take these and you can fish these down in here and around to where they're right, and do both of them on both sides. Now this one is the bottom one. The way you can tell the difference between the bottom one and the top one that goes on is the top one has the little notch. See the notch on that one right here? There's no notch on the bottom one. So that's how you know the difference between top and bottom. Make sure you do that. Make sure when you put your top one in that these grooves right here that's on this go towards the outside facing this crank as well. See, I got these main bearings set in here. I got them put back in the same way they come out. Remember the thrust washers that go on the top, they have the notch on them, and the grooves in them face towards the camshaft on both sides. I got them on there. All I done was I just put them on there and just hand tied them. So now you have to put these, you have to torque these in sequence. The sequence I'm going to show you, but it starts on the inside and works its way out, and they torque to 76 foot-pounds. The torque sequence for your main bearing caps as shown: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. This part right here being the back of the engine. So don't mess that up. This part here being towards the back of the engine, torque these in this sequence down to 76 foot-pounds. Still do not turn the crank at all, and I'll show you why. 6 foot-pounds, they start with this being the back of the engine. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I just took this one loose because it's in the back. I figured it'd be the most aggravating to get on and off. Go ahead and do it first. All you do is break you a piece of that plastic gauge. As you can see, it's just real thin plastic stuff that comes out of this pack. Now the reason why I said don't lubricate it was because you'll get oil in here and it will change this. I don't know how dramatically, but it'll change it. So make sure that surface is dry, which we already did. Make sure that your new main bearing that's here, make sure that that is clean. I'm going to wipe that back off. It's where I had those gloves on. Took them gloves off, so here's what you do. All these are still torqued down the way they're supposed to be. I'm going to take this one, take that with that plastic guide on there, and I'm going to set this back on there, and I'm going to torque it down to spec. Don't spin this crank at all. Cannot stress that enough. Don't move this crank. Put this cap back on here. Torque it back down to 76 foot-pounds. Wait just, I don't know, a couple seconds. Take it off. Loosen it up. Take it off. That will be squashed. Once that piece of plastic gauge is squashed, we'll be able to look on there. There's a piece of it still hanging out. You'll lay it down beside of it and we'll be able to tell what our clearance is for this bearing to make sure that it's correct and that it's getting the right amount of oil. On there, 76 foot-pounds. It's torqued. Now, without spinning your crank, I'm going to take these back off. Pull this off. As you can see that smear mark that's down in here? See the smear mark that's right here? See that smear mark? That will tell us the clearance of this bearing. And here's how it works. I know that our clearance cannot be within 0.001 inch between that and 0.003 is our limit. It's in our book. So all you have to do is take a piece of this plastic guide, just here. See the clearance on them? The green, the big fat green one, shows you 0.001, 0.0015, 0.002, 0.003. If it's anything smaller than that 0.003, that is bad. That is out of tolerance. You will need to have your crank turned. It will have to go to a machine shop. That, or it could be a bearing issue. You might get away with putting bigger size bearings in it, which have more of the area surfaced off, so that way more oil will flow. Either which way, that would be bad. If we look at ours, you can't see very good because the lighting's not very good in here at the moment. Look at it, and I compare that to size. Now you can rip this off if you like, but I know that specifically is within tolerance according to that. So I know that bearing is good. So now I can put that on there, tighten that down, and I know that bearing is good. That way I can work my way to the rest of the bearings and do them the same way. So take your time and be diligent.